Denver Nuggets add Dario Saric. They keep Vlatko Cancar. They're still waiting on Russell Westbrook. We'll talk about the moves and what's next for the Nuggets here on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us here. If you listen to this on the podcast, you're catching it on a Sunday morning before World's Finest later tonight. I want to go ahead and get in an episode here on Saturday to talk about the big news because the Nuggets have themselves a new big man. Dario Saric signs with the Denver Nuggets on Saturday. They finally get their guy. This has been hinted at by Harrison Wind about 1 million times over the last couple of weeks. And so they add Dario Saric. They get their guy. That's the guy they've had. The Nuggets have had two guys kind of circled. It's Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric. And they're still waiting on Westbrook. And we'll talk about why they're waiting on Westbrook later today. We'll talk about all that and more on today's show. Plus, we'll get into the impacts of not only getting Saric, but keeping Vlatko Cancar and where they are in the Western Conference. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Thanks for joining us. If you're catching us, by the way, on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets, so many folks hanging out with me on a Saturday night. Just, you're good people in the chat. If you want to support the show, give me a like on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Tell me how big a factor you think Dario Saric will be for the Denver Nuggets in 2024-25. All right, let's get right down to it. So the Denver Nuggets get Dario Saric. No surprise. This is not a surprise. We haven't talked about it much just because I wasn't sure if it was going to be the actual thing that kind of came through. And so I wanted to see whether it actually happened or not, because to be quite frank, I think that there was probably a little bit of competition for it. The Nuggets signed Saric to a 2-year, $10.6 million deal. The deal does include a player option for the second year, so we can try and recoup some of what I think he's lost over the last couple of years in free agency. Saric spent a lot of time with the Sixers. He was a process Sixer for several seasons from 17 through 2019 before he was traded to Minnesota and then wound up in Phoenix. And that's really where he had a career renaissance. Saric, I was always kind of like, yeah, Saric was fine. And then with Phoenix, when he reinvented himself into a small ball 5, I really think that there was a substantial kind of shift here with where his game is. Like a lot of guys, he's playing bigger as he gets older. That makes sense. That's how most guys are. He is 6'10", 225, so he's got the size. The best thing I can kind of say about Saric is that he's hyper versatile. He's a guy that is a smart player. He combines kind of like the veteran savvy of Jeff Green with better athleticism, although it's been diminished since his ACL injury 3 years ago. Shooting capacity as a pick and pop big. So like think of what everyone wanted Zeke Naji to be. Saric is like that if he was good. Is not a not terrible way to kind of think about it. He's versatile. He can switch. So you can play this lineup. And in a vacuum, I think there's probably not a lot that I could say about Saric in terms of his impact. He was a negative EPM player. That's the catch-all metric I trust most. It's not the only one I look at, but it is the one that I trust the most. He was a negative player on that end. And the Warriors, despite having Chris Paul and having an overall pretty good bench unit, and Saric had some really good stretches for them this season, they were still a negative with Saric on the floor. And that to me is kind of like telling a little bit that they did lose his minutes despite the bench overall being pretty good. Now he started a lot, and that was part of the problem, was like the starters weren't very good for Golden State. In related news, Klay Thompson's no longer there. So there's kind of like this combination of things that he kind of brings to the table. I don't think that this is a fix for the second unit. I just don't. What I will say though, is that if you kind of link it together with the fact that Vlatko Cancar re-signs on a 1-year minimum contract deal via Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette and Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype, Vlatko's back too. I actually really kind of like the idea of Vlatko and Saric together. You throw in De'Ron Holmes, and I'm all of a sudden, I'm like, De'Ron Holmes, I'm all of a sudden like, okay, now you're kind of cooking with gas. if Peyton can become a little bit more of a secondary playmaker, if they do add Russ, this does change the things. I like that versatility. And it's another veteran, which I'm going to be in favor of, but also just like Saric has utility. There's things that Saric does. Now, the problem is really Saric, like I said, was really great in 2021 with that Suns team. And if he doesn't get hurt and tear his ACL, I genuinely think that might have been what flipped the finals, because they needed a small ball option and they lost it. And the next year, without Saric being available, they abandoned that, and that really hurt them. You need this small ball look, I think, when Jokic isn't on the floor. Like, I do think it's better to try and, because Olynyk is not available, I do think it's genuinely better to try and be like, okay, we can't program the same way that we do with Jokic on the floor. We need to go the opposite direction, and going to a small ball look, I think is a really good option here. So like having Vlatko, having Saric, two guys with marginal NBA careers, both of whom have had ACL surgery, not ideal, but at least I think their skill sets complement one another. And that's that to me is maybe the upside of this is I like Saric less in a vacuum of what he provides and more of, okay, if we imagine the second unit and the pieces do kind of fit into where they should go, if you get a pop from Julian Strawther, if Holmes pops, if Peyton Watson takes a step, there I can kind of start to see like, okay, maybe this can work in the second unit and be like a viable, normal second unit where the entire team doesn't die like passing gas in an elevator. Like maybe you can get to that point with Saric. So like, I think it does kind of help in that direction. Now, this is to say, like, he's going to have to earn the minutes and he's going to have to get the confidence of the training staff. And I don't know where that's going to be at, like, or the coaching staff. I don't know where that's going to be at. I just don't know. It's not that Saric is a veteran, so he's going to have a leg up on the competition, but I don't think that it's like, oh, he's definitely going to play and play a lot, even on this 10.5, because I think he'll be the incumbent, but he'll have some competition and he'll have to kind of earn it. If nothing else, hey, maybe this is good because it gives Zeke Naji somebody to compete with. I don't think he's done well in that situation before where, he's lost minutes to DJ. That's extremely worrisome. But maybe with it being a similar type guy, maybe Zeke comes in and like competes with that guy and you get more out of him. Zamora asked, could Saric play with Jokic? Yes, every human being on the planet can play with Nikola Jokic. Except maybe Gary Trent Jr. That's like the one guy that I would say probably not. I really wish people would stop suggesting him. I think that's an absurd idea. And if it happens, I'm going to be like, I don't like that. I don't like that move. Could entirely happen. I'll just tell you right now. Do not think that that's the move. Yes, Saric can play power forward next to Jokic. If Aaron Gordon or MPJ has to miss a game, Saric makes a lot of sense as your spot starter. So that's another addition here where I talk a lot about redundancy and taking care of your injury options. If Gordon or MPJ has to miss time, I feel totally fine plugging Saric in and you're still able to space the floor adequately. And he's got some versatility on the other end. Like the athleticism is a little bit diminished since he obviously had the ACL surgery. But again, with him and Vlatko, I just feel like you have a lot of options for how you can go now. That power forward spot, and really 3, 4, 5 now has some redundancy. Likewise, if Nikola Jokic has to miss a game and the Nuggets are playing the Hornets, you can plug Dario Saric in and you can probably win that game. Like you are better than 50% on the road to win that game. And that I think is a pretty good pickup. Zamora asked, the defense doesn't worry you. So I think a lot of this gets into how are you using him? Right? Like, are you using him in switch all situations? Are you using him as like a hedge? Are you just going to play switch all? In a playoff environment, I care about that, Zamora. I don't care a lot, I'll be honest with you, about regular season because guys don't get picked on. Like every team is just trying to run through their stuff and work on their dynamics and sharpen their stuff. They're not targeting you except in like really important game situations. So if Saric is in the game at the end, sure, that might be a problem. And there might be some games where some teams hunt. Oklahoma City will hunt him. Like, that's an example, because Oklahoma City is one of the few teams that does hunt in the regular season. They switch hunt. The Mavericks will a little bit, not as much, but a little bit. But I'm also not necessarily as worried about that. And I do think that Saric probably has better days ahead offensively, I think, than maybe he's had. I think he's probably got some better days ahead of him. On the other side, I want to talk about Russell Westbrook, the waiting game. We'll talk a little bit about Vlatko. Plus, KCP had some comments about the Nuggets not offering anything. We'll talk about that on the other side here on Locked On Nuggets. Right now, I want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and being with us here on a Sunday. I hope your weekend's going great. The weather's incredible, and never this time of year. It's going to get to be like in the hundreds next week, which is a bummer, but I will enjoy it because I like the heat. But still, it's been beautiful here in northern Colorado. Hope you guys are having a good off season, even if the Nuggets off season has not been good. Real quick on Russ. So everyone's kind of wondering like what's going on. The reality of it is this. The Clippers are gonna move him, okay, and they're gonna move him to a team that buys him out, and then the Nuggets will sign him. If that doesn't happen, it will be because the Clippers are that petty versus the Nuggets. They wouldn't let PJ Tucker go last season because they knew that he was either going to sign with Phoenix or Denver, and those were both options they didn't want to have to face in the Western Conference playoffs. So I don't agree with that tactic. I think that if you don't intend to play a guy, especially a veteran, you should let him go. But with Russ, I think that they're much more like they're not in a hurry. The Clippers don't need to do this deal. There's no rush for them because they're not going to get anything back on it. They're not trading Russ for a second rounder. They're not trading Russ for a player or an asset. They're just trading him to basically move him and move on. And as such, they're open to waiting on this. It might be August. It might be September. It might be camp when they finally make this deal. Do I expect Russell Westbrook to be in Denver after? Yeah, I do. That's what I expect. But Denver's like not moving assets for Russell Westbrook because they know they're in the driver's seat. And I don't think they think of him as, how can I put this? I think they feel that getting Russ is important because Nikola Jokic wants it. I don't feel that they're in any sort of hurry to get this. They're not anxious to get this deal done. They're not like, ooh. So they're not going to give up assets to get Russ. That'd be a bad use of assets. They don't have any left anyway. So there's no real option here. They're going to trade. They will wait until someone trades for him and then buys him out. It might be Utah again. And then they'll resign. And then they'll sign Russell Westbrook. If that doesn't happen, other events will have had to have occurred that I haven't heard about. KCP in his introductory presser today with the Orlando Magic talked about how he did not get a counteroffer from Denver. I know Tony Jones reported that they'd offer something similar. I love Tony. Tony's the best. I might have Tony on the show sometime. Tony and I get along great. My understanding was that there was no real effort to counteroffer KCP. That they understood what he was going to get in the market, and they had already decided that they were not going to match it because any effort to match it was going to put them in the apron. and they were not going to do that. Second apron. Do I think that that's like the best way to have handled things? Probably not. Like, you want to have a better open line of communication with the guy that won you a championship. I think that's probably not great. I think that there's still an appreciation for KCP, but I also think that maybe it was pretty clear that both sides were ready to move on for whatever reason. I don't know what those reasons maybe are. I would start probably with the confidence that the team has in Christian Brown and that they're just ready to move on to that. Like, you got to understand, like, this team really believes in Christian. Like, it really believes in Christian way more than I do. And I could be wrong because I've been around long about lots of guys that they believed in, but they believe in Christian Brown a lot. And so I think that there was like a real confidence there. And I think that they understood that because of the financial realities, that even if they were able to get KCP on some sort of deal, it would move them within range of the second apron after they made any other moves. And that would mean that they were going to be there. Plus, it would limit their ability next year when they're going to be in the exact same spot again with Aaron Gordon, with how deep in the second apron they're going to be. So that to me is, I think, how that kind of played out. I think the whole thing's unfortunate, but it's, this is a business and everybody understands that, including KCP. And KCP is always going to be appreciated in Denver for what he contributed to the first championship in franchise history. And so that to me is kind of how this goes. I kind of brushed over this in the first segment, so I want to talk about it. Vlatko Cancar re-signs on a minimum 1-year deal. Look, ACL surgery is no longer as bad as it used to be. That's not as bad as it kind of was. It used to be like a really devastating problem. Was like if you had a torn ACL, you were done. Amari Stoudemire was never the same. They used to have what was called microfracture surgery. And if that sounds horrific, it was, because it was literally what they did. And it was absolutely terrifying, and it ruined a lot of careers. Thankfully, they've moved past that. And now ACLs are really not that big of a deal long-term. You're not the same after as you were before, but you're also not like careers over. You can keep playing for quite a long time. And I think Vlatko, because he doesn't have as many miles on him, actually still has quite a lot to bring. Vlatko's well liked by the team. Vlatko is a pretty versatile guy. And I think he gets overstated sometimes by various people that believe that he's like a real serious impact guy. In terms of like CT Fazio on Twitter, very, very big. Love the guy. Good analysis, but I'm just not as high on him as that. But I have kind of come around to the fact that, like, no, Vlatko can play. Like, Vlatko's given them good minutes. And when Vlatko has been removed from the rotation afterwards, I've been like, I don't agree with that assessment. Like, he'd earned those minutes. Now, for whatever reason, the team just hasn't trusted him. So whether that's coaching staff, veterans, whatever, he has not stayed in that rotation. So I think it's something to kind of wonder about. But I am glad to see Vlatko back, because it's continuity. He's been there a long time, and he understands how to play alongside all the other Nuggets. So in general, I think Vlatko is a bonus for getting him back. I think that's actually a pretty good move for them. All right. we have an itch in the comments talking about how bad Vlatko is because of how he was in a qualifier. I don't care, man. I really don't. On the other side, we'll get to this question. Do the Nuggets have enough in the Western Conference? That's a tough one. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Saturday. World's Finest will be with you on Sunday. Adam and I will break down. I think we're doing Sunday night. I'll put it on Twitter whether we're doing it Sunday or Monday. Adam is getting some well-deserved time away, but I think he's back tomorrow. If not, we'll do a show on Monday morning. All right, let's answer this question. Do the Nuggets have enough in the Western Conference? Let's assume they get Russell Westbrook. They add Dario Saric. Those were their two targets. They draft Holmes. Vlatko's back. Christian Brown is now the 2 guard. Peyton Watson, internal development from Peyton Watson, Julian Strother, and the like. What does this look like? Okay. So today I was going through my numbers. And if you'll remember last year, those numbers said the Nuggets were going to win less than 50 games, and they won 57, which seems bad. The problem for me is that most of the metrics, if you kind of look back at them, back me up as like, no, Denver was not as good as their record was. Now, it doesn't matter. Like, they won their games. I had concerns because a lot of it was kind of propped up on their based off of their clutch rating. And if you'll remember, that didn't go great. Like, that just did not go great for the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs. Was like, that was not a great addition. So I ran some of the numbers and I kind of came out with where I think Denver's going to be next season. I'm not going to tell you where they are in the Western Conference because I have to like decide if I really want to put that out into the world. I will tell you that there's a number of teams that are above them. And some of these teams are teams that I do not think are as good because they just wind up in my numbers as like, oh, hey, this team actually looks really good because of their combination of offense and defense. But they are firmly behind several teams. And the biggest problem, this has been mentioned in the comments here on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. They're way behind the top of the West. They're way behind the Thunder. So we never really kind of got to test this theory because the Thunder lost in the second round and the Nuggets lost in the second round. The Thunder went 3-1 versus Denver last year, and we kind of like brushed it off like, okay, well, KCP missed a game and they won a clutch weird game in Denver. And then there was another one and there was a bunch of like, it was weird. OKC, I think, matches up better with Denver than maybe we kind of anticipated because the idea is like, well, Jokic is so dominant and they don't have a center, and they do now. And Hartenstein doesn't really matter. Jokic is going to score on anybody. But the big problem is just like Oklahoma City has so much shooting offensively. They have an individual player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, by the way, the best defender against him on Denver was KCP. I don't think Christian will do as well against him. He'll do better against Anthony Edwards. KCP struggled with Ant, right? Got cooked by him. Christian was pretty good on Ant. I think Christian won't do as well versus Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They got Shea. They've got Chet with another year under his belt. They've got J-Dub. They have all this talent, but they also have all this shooting. And they add Caruso, who's now going to be able to, alongside guys like Cason Wallace, guys like Lou Dort, hound Jamal Murray on ball, much the way the Minnesota Timberwolves did. They have guys like Isaiah Hartenstein that they're just absolute monsters on the offensive glass. And that's going to help considerably. They have size to combat Denver's too big. Like, they have Chet Holmgren and Hartenstein now, and that's a really big combo. Hurricane asks, is Mike the only plus shooter on the team? Right now, besides Jamal? Depends on what you think of Christian Brown. Maybe Julian. Depends on what you think of Christian Brown. That's the reality. It's like, you got to like, if you think that what you saw from above the break, Christian Brown last year is who he is, then you got another one. Saric was also 38% last year. He's a good shooter. So that's the Thunder, and that's just one team. The other problem is like when I ran some numbers today, Dallas came out way better than I was expecting, and now I kind of have to grapple with the fact of Klay Thompson, for all of his warts now at this age, after both the Achilles and the ACL, Klay Thompson's still a dude in this league. Like, he's just still a guy in this league. And I got to be honest with you, he's way more of a guy than Russell Westbrook is at this point in this league. And I hate that because, like, I loved watching Russ in his prime. But Russ just isn't as much of a guy. That's why he's on the bench. And it's possible Klay Thompson comes off the bench. But I was surprised when I looked at the stuff that I use that I came out with, oh, wow, they're way better with Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson. Now, I don't love the fits for those guys as much as I like Derrick Jones Jr. and what like Josh Green brought, but they are objectively better players. And so Dallas upgraded. Minnesota hasn't gotten any worse. Like, they're just the same team. There's no real reason to think Minnesota should be any worse, barring injury. Now, they do have Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. Sure. Definitely a thing to be on the lookout for. They're going to have to manage that. They're still going to be really good. But those three teams in the Western Conference, I have no way for me right now after what has happened to the Nuggets over the last 2 seasons, losing Bruce Brown, then KCP, to look at this and go that Denver is better than those teams. It's not really about keeping pace, because I think sometimes that's a weird way to look at it, because a lot of times you add guys and it doesn't work. Like, it's possible Hartenstein just doesn't work for OKC, or Caruso just isn't as good. That's that weird. Basketball is weird. It happens. Al Horford went to Philadelphia and it was a disaster. They hate him there. Al Horford's a Hall of Famer who everyone loves except Philly. That to me says more about Philly, but still, it happens. And so it is impossible to really say that Denver has not lost ground in the Western Conference. Now, the counter to this is just, look, every single year, Malone has gone over the win total. Every single year, Nikola Jokic is a top 3 player in MVP. Every single year, Jokic is one of, if not the most impactful players in basketball. And when you have a guy that great and you surround him with decent enough talent, and you can't say that the talent on the Nuggets is bad. They still have Jamal. They still have AG. They still have MPJ. Like, MPJ didn't get instantly bad. MPJ had a good season last year. He was a more consistent player than a lot of guys on the Nuggets. If Jamal has a bounce back year, which is going to be all of the talk, then they're going to be way better, right? So there's all these ways that the Nuggets are fine. It's just the best way to kind of think about this is that their insurance policies are gone. On those random nights where it was like, oh man, nobody really had it going, but KCP gave him 25 off the bat, 25. Like, that happened. Like, KCP had huge scoring nights sometimes, just had the opportunity, found his way into some threes, hit some pull-up jumpers. Do I have confidence Christian Brown's going to do that? No, I do not. Is this bench unit going to be better next year? Maybe. Somebody was arguing with me on Twitter saying, like, all it's got to be is like a normal bad. And I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, look, guys, I've seen so many iterations of this, and it's never normal bad. It's always horrifically terrible, to the point where I have to imagine that that's something to do with how the team is constructed or coached, rather than it is any sort of like one combination of players. The players look, this is a big key. The players, the personnel will always look worse when the team doesn't work right. Like, good players look bad when the team doesn't work right. And we see that all the time in the NBA. It's one of the reasons why I'm pretty high on the Pelicans, because I think DeJounte Murray is really good. Him in Atlanta didn't work. Nobody in Atlanta works right now, and I don't really have the answer for why. Trae Young is a shorthand for it. Like, everyone's just like, well, it's Trae Young because that's the consistent factor. But I can't point to anything Trae's doing and be like, it's this. It just doesn't work. Now, if the Nuggets, if Christian Brown comes in and it works, that's all you're going to care about. And guess what? Then everyone's going to be like, man, Calvin Booth, what a genius. He identified that Christian Brown was better than KCP. And that's not true. Like, at where we are right now, Christian Brown is not a better player than KCP. And it's, to be perfectly quite honest with you, it's not particularly close. I don't mind my colleagues talking about how it's going to be fine, because they are right that if you put anything next to Nikola Jokic, it's going to be pretty good. The difference is that KCP was good other places, was a championship level starter other places before he got to play with Nikola Jokic. The only good we've seen from Christian Brown is when he plays with Jokic. I get nervous of that. I don't want to make this about Christian Brown the entire way. It's true for pretty much everybody. With Miami, there's this concern. If Miami lets somebody go, like Caleb Martin just signed with the Sixers, if the Heat let somebody go, I'm automatically red flags start going off, because every guy that they've let walk, Josh Richardson, Gabe Vincent, all of these, Max Strus to a certain degree, all of these dudes have been so much worse when they go other places outside of Heat culture. And with the Nuggets, you don't really see that much. But I will tell you that Jeremy Grant looked a lot better playing next to Nikola Jokic than he has anywhere else. Marshall Mathers says, all the weight can't be on Jokic again this season. Well, guess what? It's going to be again. Leper Beat says, lack of depth killed this team going into the playoffs. Everyone was gassed or hurt. Now it'll be 2 times worse. Okay. I want to address that real quick because we got some time. Do you want to know who has to be the most forward about taking care of that problem? And you're going to hate this answer, because it goes against how we think about sports. Here's how we think about sports. The players play and the coaches coach. That's not how it is in the NBA. The players, most oftentimes, the star players, they make their rotations. So Nikola Jokic plays the entire first quarter, or 10 minutes first quarter, last 8 second quarter, all third quarter, last 8 fourth quarter. That's because that's what Nikola Jokic wants. And I will just tell you right now that, again, a big reason why the starters played so much together last year, which is such a huge talking point this season, is because that's what the players wanted. They wanted to win games. And if you want to win games, you play your starters heavy minutes. That's what you do. They wanted to get the 1 seed. The starters have to collectively, in tandem with the coaches, and the coaches have to be upfront about this. I'm not letting the coaches off the hook here. The coaches have to be like, hey, we got burned last year because you guys were gassed. You got to sit. But the players then have to be like, okay, fine. All right. Like Jokic always says, if they want me to sit, I'll sit. Nope, I don't believe that. Me personally, I don't buy that. I think Jokic sets the tone and is like, can I play? Yeah, yes, you can play. I'm playing. Jokic has to take that step back. Aaron Gordon has to take that step back. Jamal, quite honestly, needs to be this is what's going to be frustrating. Jamal's going to get this extension if he signs it. And when he signs it and he plays this season, there's going to be times when he needs to sit. And you're going to be frustrated that he's not available, but you have to do those things so you don't wind up with a repeat of last year. And you say, like, well, he sat and he was still hurt. Absolutely, which is a hard thing to balance. But you also can't go the other way and be like, well, he was hurt then, so we're going to play him. That's how you're going to wind up with a long-term injury. So you got to do all those kind of things. Okay. Okay. Final thing. The Nuggets still have enough in the Western Conference. They still have the best. Any given night, they're going to have the best player in the world on their team. Jamal has still a very big ability to step up and have a better season. Christian can surprise me and be every bit as good as everyone kind of thinks he can be. Peyton Watson, I actually have the most optimism for making a big leap. Saric and Westbrook can work out great. There's still like a lot of upside for this team. You should be able to turn the corner now. This offseason was disappointing. Yes, this offseason was disappointing. You have not gone from championship contender favorite in the West to 8th seed. You are somewhere in the middle. You are no longer I think you are no longer the top dog of the conference. Sportsbooks still think you are. It's either the Thunder or the Nuggets as the favorite in the Western Conference at all the books. Okay. But you're somewhere between the top, which I think is the Thunder, and the 6th seed. And where you fall in there is probably going to be determined by health, by luck, by internal development. But that doesn't mean this team isn't worth rooting for. Just because you're frustrated doesn't mean this team is not good enough to win you a championship. Because it is. Because I'll tell you this team is still considerably better than the Dallas Mavericks were last year. They're still better than that team. Now, this current Mavericks team might be better, but they're still better than the Mavs were last year. And the Mavs were 3 wins away from an NBA title. That should be like the way to think about this. It doesn't matter how you get there. Get back to the finals. Just beat the guys in front of you. Figure it out. Get back to the finals. And you do that, you're in pretty good shape. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Appreciate you guys being with us. Hope you guys have yourselves a great Sunday. I will talk to you again on World's Finest either Sunday night or Monday morning. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Give me the 5-star reviews. Have yourselves a great day. And I'll see you guys again next time here on Locked On Nuggets.